nací en Nueva York, en el condado de Manhattan. Yo nací en Nueva York, en el condado de Manhattan.
On today's show, it gives me an enormous pleasure to welcome a legend of our salsa scene, Mr. Henry Fiol, songwriter, singer, percussionist, you name it, an absolute legend. Mr. Henry Fiol, how are you? Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today. How are you?
Well, thank you, Tuli. I'm doing fine. I hope you and all of the listeners are doing well as well.
Fantastic. So, Henry, we with you today because we want to talk about a new facet in your life, which is writing. But before we get there, of course, we would like to also cover a little bit about your huge career as a musician and to give a little bit of background to our listeners about your career as a musician. So, if we start from the beginning, so you're based in the US, you were born in New York from an Italian American mother and a Puerto Rican father, and you actually before you went into music, you were into arts, into fine arts. So tell us a little bit about that before you became a musician.
Well, I always liked music, but my the talent that revealed itself at a very early age was my ability to draw and to paint. And I remember my mother was told in school that they didn't have the resources to develop my talent, so they suggested that I take art classes. And I used to go to a studio when I was little, maybe about 8 years old, and I used to take art classes once a week, and I learned how to do oil paintings at a very early age. I was
Wow.
making oil paintings at 8 or 9 years old. And then I kept on drawing and painting. Mostly what I would draw would be racehorses all the time, because my father was involved in the racetrack, and he eventually became a racehorse trainer. And I was very enthusiastic about the racetrack, and I loved the horses, and that's the only thing I wanted to draw was drawings of horses. And as I got older, I got into other things. I went to college. I majored in fine art, and unfortunately, after I graduated and I came face to face with the reality of the art world, the art business, which unfortunately there's a lot of speculation. It's something very elitist for the aristocracy, and I felt like a fish out of water in that environment. And I got very disillusioned and disappointed after so many years of studying art to be spend the rest of my life around these people. I didn't identify with them at all, and little by little, I moved into the path of music. And back in when I first started out, the format was LPs, and
Right.
I used to paint the covers of my LP albums because the size of it lended itself to illustration or a painting. But then after it was reduced to CDs and cassettes, it lost the impact, and I stopped doing it. But little by little, I got into music. I never was trained as a musician. I'm basically an ear musician, and little by little, I got into music. First as a percussionist, and eventually as a singer.
Were any of your parents musicians? Did they play any instruments?
Well, not my parents, but on my mother's family, there was one of my uncles was a very renowned flautist in the
Wow.
United States. He played with the Los Angeles Symphony. He was the lead flutist for Warner Brothers that made the
Wow.
movies, and he was one of the best flautists in all of the United States. His name was Leonard Porcella. Was
Wow.
yeah. But outside of him, I had uncles who played guitar and stuff like that. But in my immediate family, there was no musicians.
Wow. And is it true that you self-taught yourself to play the flute?
Well, that was my first instrument actually, because at that time when I got into Latin music in New York City, the charanga style was very popular. Everything was charanga and variations of charanga, and I liked the sound of the flute, and I was able to get a 5 key wooden flute that they use in charanga music. And unfortunately, I took a couple of lessons with a Cuban gentleman, but my Spanish wasn't very good at that time, and he would make me do these exercises in these very complicated uh, solfeo books in Spanish, and I got frustrated and I just stopped. But I got a fingering chart and I learned the fingering, and then I used to play the flute by ear, and I used to play along with my records.
Amazing. And how about the percussion side of things? How did that all begin?
Well, that started a few years later in New York at that time, and they still do it, but at that time they did it a little more. There was jam sessions or rumbas that that would get formed in the parks and the beaches and the neighborhoods, and I was very attracted to that. And I got a cheap conga. I practiced with my records at home, and then eventually I went out and I would participate in the rumbas, and and then after that I started playing with different groups in New York as a conga player and and a coro singer. I used to play conga and sing coro.
Amazing.
Chorus.
And some of the bands that you participated with was Orquesta Capri, right? And Orquesta Broadway.
Well, Orquesta Broadway, I didn't last very long, only about a month with the Orquesta Broadway. But the Orchestra Capri, I was with them for more than a year, and I learned a lot with that group. It was the word Orquesta Capri is misleading because it was really a conjunto with two trumpets, and the repertoire was covers of a lot of old Cuban conjunto songs. And the leader of the group, who I just recently found out who has passed away, his name was Felix Morales, piano player, and he was very strict, and he only wanted one conga, and he didn't want any little I don't know the word in English, floreos or any uh, accents. He
Right.
wanted you to keep right locked into the tumbao and to stay very clean and very precise. And that's the lesson I learned from the Orchestra Capri, and that carried over into Saoko. After we formed Saoko, a lot of those lessons that I learned from Orchestra Capri, I carried them over. And when I started with my own um, group as a soloist, I continued with that style as well.
Right. So that transition from working with these bands to then decide that, you know what, I want to create my own band. What led you to it?
Well, didn't happen that way. What happened was is that I had composed. Um, well, I should tell you the whole story. When I got into Latin music, I started to investigate the roots of the music,
Right.
and I used to get all of these old Cuban records that were inexpensive, reissued albums that I would get in a record store in the subway in New York for $1.99, very inexpensive. But I learned from them, and then I started to investigate the roots of the music. At that time, they still hadn't called it salsa yet, and I studied the old Cuban conjuntos. I studied the música campesina, or the
Right.
country music from Cuba, and I was very into the authentic sound of the roots of the salsa music.
Yeah.
And to make an analogy, it would be very similar to what the Rolling Stones did or the Beatles did at the beginning. They fell in love with music from another culture and they wanted to be as authentic as possible. Like the Rolling Stones, when they first started out, they wanted to sound like they came off of the Mississippi Delta, and
Right.
they wanted to play blues in a very authentic way. And the same thing happened to me. I studied that old Cuban music, and I wanted to sound very authentic. And I composed some songs in that old traditional Cuban style. And in order to get these songs to bring them to light, I decided the only way to do that was to start a group and to sing them myself
Wow.
because most of the other musicians weren't familiar with that style. So the only way to really uh, get that style, that sound that I was looking for, was to do it myself. So to make a long story short, together with my partner William Millan, who was an excellent bass player, we formed the Saoko.
Hmm.
And the first couple of albums with Saoko, they were original songs that I had written that I tried to sing and we arranged them in that traditional Cuban style.
And how did you feel moving from percussion to then actually being a vocalist?
Well, at the beginning, at the beginning, I used to play conga and sing lead at the same time with Saoko. And the first album I recorded as a conga player and a lead vocalist. And at the beginning, in the live performances, I would play the conga and sing lead. But that was very unusual. It didn't look good. So we decided to get a conga player, and then I went out front as a vocalist. And it took me a while to get used to it, but then I became comfortable with that. But I played conga on a lot of my subsequent recordings, and in my show, my live performance, the last song in the show, the song is called La Última Rumba, and I play conga in that last song to kind of close off the show. So I'm still a percussionist. I'm still playing conga and I'm involved with it. But I made that transition from conga player to vocalist with Saoko.
Amazing. And that connection between your art knowledge and then becoming a musician and trying to bring in your art into your music. Tell us a little bit about that and the covers of your albums.
Well, like I said before, the size of an LP, which was about 13 inches square, lended itself to a painting. So I used to make oil paintings and then have them photographed and reduced to the size of an LP. And the first album of Saoko, at that time there was a magazine in New York City, Latin New York magazine, and one year they had awards for the best in all these different categories: the best singer, the best album, the best this, the best that, and I won the award for the best album cover of the year
Wow.
for the cover of the first Saoko album. And I think that in those days, the cover art was very important
Yes.
because a lot of times the buyer, the record buyer, especially when they weren't familiar with an artist, they would get intrigued. The cover art would pique their curiosity, and a lot of times that's what motivated them to make the purchase. And with Saoko, we were unknown young musicians, and I think that that album cover kind of helped to put us on the map because there was something about that cover that clicked with the public. They got the message that this was really authentic,
Authentic.
typical uh, roots type of music, and they I guess they bought the record, and little by little, Saoko got his name on the map.
Amazing. So you did 2 albums with Saoko, and then what led you to then decide, you know what, now I want to become a solo artist?
Well, that's not the way it happened. What happened was, I didn't tell this story for many years, but at this point in time, I figure I might as well say the truth, because
Awesome.
there's nothing to hide at this point. The second Saoko album was called Macho Mumba, and I spent months and months painting that illustration for the cover. It was a very complicated painting because you had to be not only an artist, but you also had to be a musician and a conga player to understand what a rumba was, and the positions of the hands. And so I really invested a lot of time and effort into that painting. And this is the cover of the second Saoko album that I'm talking about. The title is Macho Mumba. So anyway, I brought the painting to the record company after all of this work that I put into it, and after the first cover illustration won the award and helped to put Saoko on the map. When I brought the painting to the record company, they wanted to give me $100 for my work.
Oh my God.
So I got offended and I got insulted by that. And then after that, everything snowballed, and I got very turned off to. The problem was not between William Millan and myself,
Right.
nor the other musicians. The problem was between the record company and myself. And I didn't like the treatment that they gave me when I brought all of this work that I had done that was going to be used to help them sell records. And they wanted to give me $100. So I got insulted and offended. And I said, well, later for you, you can
Wow.
finish the album yourself. And I walked out, and I didn't finish the second Saoko album. They brought in another singer,
Oh,
and
wow.
he sang a couple of the remaining songs and finished off the album. So then after that, there was a lawsuit about who owned the name Saoko, because I was the creator of that name, and I had the name registered with the state of New York in the United States. I had the legal documents. So there was a lawsuit about who had the rights to use the
Wow.
name Saoko. In fact, while the lawsuit was pending, there was 2 Saokos in the street. I had reformed Saoko, and I was playing gigs with my Saoko, and William Millan continued with his Saoko, and there was 2 Saokos out in in New York playing the clubs of New York until the lawsuit was resolved. And what happened was is that even though I was the creator and the registered owner of the name Saoko, according to or due to a clause in the contract with the record company, it turned out that the record company owned the name Saoko.
Oh,
So so after all of the work that I had put into Saoko and putting the name on the map, and the record company stayed with the name Saoko, but as a result of that lawsuit, I was given my freedom. I was released from that contract, and I was allowed to record under any other name except Saoko. So after that bad experience and that tug of war over the name and all of the legal battle over the name Saoko, I learned my lesson, and I said, well, if I'm going to continue to record, I'm going to record under the name that my mother and father gave me, that nobody can take away from me.
absolutely.
So that's what I decided to do. And at that time, Roberto Torres and 2 partners had formed the SAR label, SAR, and they were recording different singers with a studio band. and their focus was on the typical authentic Cuban sound, and their style of music on that label and my style was a good fit. And I really can't remember who called who, but we were able to work out a deal, and I recorded my first album as a soloist called Fe, Esperanza y Caridad, Faith, Hope, and Charity, with the SAR label. And that turned out to be a big international hit. I was very lucky with those first two albums on SAR. I had number one hits in Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and other countries as well. And that those first two albums launched my career as a soloist on an international level.
And you mentioned Venezuela. So tell us a little bit about the story behind Mala Suerte and how popular that was in Venezuela.
Well, what happened was is that as I was growing up, my father used to play 78 records at home, and most of them were corny bolero records that I didn't like. But one of the songs was was a guaracha, or a up-tempo song that had been recorded by Bobby Capó in the 1940s, and it was entitled Mala Suerte, Bad Luck in English.
Yes.
And I liked that song when I was a kid. And after I became a singer and I got involved in Latin music, I decided to record it and to change it around a little bit and make a salsa version of that song. And I changed the lyrics a little bit, and I added things from the racetrack. Oh, I hit the triple, and then I lost my ticket, and my 100 to 1 horse fell and broke his leg on the turn, and I used examples from the racetrack. And what happened was is that in Venezuela, horse racing was very, very popular, and it still is.
Yes.
And I guess because everybody was involved in the racetrack, and they could relate to some of the lyrics to the song, it became a big hit in Venezuela, and I think it got to number one in Venezuela.
Yeah, I can tell you a story. For me, that song reminds me of my brother, because whenever we used to bicker or something used to happen to me, he's my eldest brother, and he would come to me and say "Mala suerte" every time he used to sing the song to me to wind me up whenever something happened.
Wow.
So those are the memories of me and that song. I love it. Absolutely love it. And then there's the other story about Ahora Pena Me Da and Compay Segundo. I understand that when you re-recorded that track, you changed the lyrics a little bit, and you were a bit worried about Compay Segundo being offended by you changing the lyrics. So you actually you met him, right? In the end.
Yeah, well, Tuli, I've told this story many times, but what happened was is on the first album with SAR Records, Roberto Torres, the producer, he didn't want any original songs. He only wanted me to do cover versions of old Cuban songs. I think it had to do with the idea of not paying any royalties, because at that time there was no diplomatic relations with Cuba, and they could get away with using Cuban music without paying any royalties. But anyway, that's besides the point. So anyway, he suggested several songs to me, and one of the songs that he suggested was Ahora Me Da Pena. And I listened to it, I liked it. I got together with my arranger, and we took the country version with guitars that I was shown by Roberto Torres, and we expanded it, and we added some different choruses, and we took the song, the country version, and we made it into salsa. But the original lyrics, the third verse, Compay Segundo, talks about Cuba and his hometown, and yo nací en Siboney, en la provincia de Oriente, and this and that. And I felt funny singing about that in the first person. So I decided to take the liberty to change the lyrics so that it would reflect my reality. And I, instead of saying I was born in Siboney en la provincia de Oriente, I said I was born in New York in the borough of Manhattan. And anyway, I was very worried for a long time that Compay Segundo would be upset and angry about the liberty that I took in
Yeah.
changing his lyrics, because you really shouldn't do that. And what happened was is that when the Buena Vista Social Club came to New York City to do a performance in the world famous Carnegie Hall, I got a call from Eliades Ochoa,
Oh,
who was
wow.
one of the members of the group.
Yes.
And I think it was really Compay Segundo that asked him to call me. So I was very honored and very flattered that they would even want to meet me, or that they even knew me. I had no idea that they were familiar with me or my music. And they invited me to go to the rehearsal. And I went down and I met all of the musicians, and I met Compay Segundo, who was a very nice gentleman. He was so cordial with me. I met his son who played bass with him,
Wow.
and I apologized for changing the lyrics to his song. And to the contrary, he said, "No, I love your version, and I thought it was
Wow.
great." And he wanted me to do more of his songs. And at that time, he had a big hit with that song "Chan Chan,"
Right.
and
Yes.
he wrote he took a napkin, and he wrote the lyrics to Chan Chan on a napkin, and he told me, I would like you to do a version of this because I like what you did with my songs, and maybe you could do something with this one as well. But I never got to do a version of Chan Chan, but I, I I lost the napkin. I should have saved the
Oh,
napkin. Somehow it got
no.
lost around the house. But that was my experience with Compay Segundo. I was very relieved that he wasn't angry and upset about
Yes.
the
Yes.
liberty I took with his lyrics. But it was a pleasure and an honor to meet him. He was a very talented artist, and I'm very sorry we lost him and he's no
Yes.
longer with us.
And Henry, being so fond of Cuban music and son cubano, did you ever get a chance to go to Cuba?
Well, I could have went to Cuba, I guess. My son went to Cuba twice, but I never went to Cuba. And maybe someday I will go. I don't know what will happen in the future, but I've never been to Cuba.
Right, right. Now, and talking about being a musician in New York and in the years when you know the boom of salsa was happening in New York, how would you compare those years to the salsa in New York now?
Oh, well, it's night and day. It's when I started playing salsa music in New York, it was the early 70s.
Right.
And the whole decade of the 70s was the boom for
Yes.
salsa music. And in New York, there were like, I don't know how many, there could have been as many as 100 clubs where, and there was more than 100 bands. And there was a whole circuit, a salsa circuit
Yeah.
in New York City. And you used to play all of these different clubs. It was very rarely that a weekend would go by that you didn't have a gig on Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, or Sunday. And sometimes you would even play gigs during the week as well. And then a lot of the bands would also double up and do doubles and triples. Sometimes you might do one set in one club, pack up, run to another club, do another set.
Wow.
Sometimes even three gigs in one night in three different clubs. And that's the way it was. But unfortunately, as time went on, salsa lost its appeal, especially with the young people in New York. Salsa started to become, unfortunately, it started to be considered like music of another generation by the young Latinos in
Right.
New York. They started to consider it like my parents' music, and they got more into American music, American rap. And now they're into reggaeton, they're into bachata, and I think it's very sad and it's very dangerous because the reason why they got into this other music is that along the way they lost the internal sense of the clave. And in order to dance salsa music and to really understand it and really appreciate it, you have to have that internal clave sense. You have to feel the clave inside your mind and your body. And as the years progressed, um, I even used to. It got to a point where I noticed that, for example, doing TV shows years ago, the audience would clap the clave with the artists as they were performing, and then slowly they stopped doing that, and they would clap on one and three. They would clap. They would follow the bell, but the clave feeling was slowly getting lost, and that's what happened with the young people. They lost the internal sense of the clave, and now looking towards the future, the sons and daughters of the reggaeton generation are very unlikely to recover that clave sense once now that it's been lost. So when people ask me about the future of salsa,
Mhm.
I have to say that I think it's on its last legs now,
Wow.
and it will continue, but never to the same level of popularity like it had in the 70s, for example. It's very similar to American jazz. Jazz has continued. There's a smaller circuit of jazz clubs, and there's still jazz artists making jazz recordings, and jazz has continued. It hasn't died completely, but it's nowhere near as popular as it was in its heyday in the 40s and 50s and early 60s with Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie and
Right.
John Coltrane, and that's jazz has not been able to continue with that level of popularity. And the same thing is happening with salsa. And there's also been a lot of fusion of salsa with rap, salsa with reggaeton, salsa with this, salsa mixed with música or urbana, urban music, and
I,
it will continue the same way jazz has continued, but
yeah.
eventually I think it will fade away because one has to understand that this genre that we now call salsa actually began in around 1939, 1940 with Arsenio Rodriguez
Mhm.
when he expanded the son orchestration, and he added the additional trumpet, and then he brought in the conga drum, and he made like the prototype for the salsa or the band or the conjunto, and so to trace back the history of what we now call salsa, you would have to go back like 8 decades, back to
Wow.
1940. So this is a music that has lasted for decades, and nothing in life lasts forever. Just take the big band music. The big band music lasted for maybe 20 years tops, and that was the end. Once they came out with the small rock and roll combos like Elvis Presley, and that was the end of the big band era, and it never recovered. And reggaeton is going to do to salsa what Elvis Presley and the small rock and roll bands did to the big band era. That's eventually what's going to happen to salsa, in my opinion.
So do you think that is it pivotal to have that fusion to appeal to a younger generation in order to for the salsa to survive, or do you think actually no, fusion should stay clear of salsa and keep it as it is? What do you
Well,
think?
I have to go back to the clave because the essence of our music that we call salsa is the clave. The clave is a two-bar figure that comes from West Africa that was brought to the New World by the Africans who were kidnapped and enslaved. They brought their culture, their music with them, and the clave is a very sophisticated polyrhythmic concept. And when you grow up in the tradition of Latin music and the syncopated, sophisticated polyrhythmic structure of the rhythm of the music, you have an internal sense of the clave. But once that feeling is lost, uh, you can't. It's very hard to dance to the clave if you're not feeling it. So what happened was is that the young artists in Puerto Rico, instead of continuing with their own tradition and their own culture, they took all of that sophisticated percussion, and the only thing that in the entire world that comes even close to it in sophistication might be Brazilian music with the samba and the batucada and all of that. That's the only thing that is as sophisticated as Latin music, rhythmic wise, or in terms of its rhythmic structure. So what happened was is that these rappers from Puerto Rico, instead of preserving their culture, and they took a rhythm from the Middle East, from the belly dancing, boom, tick, tick, boom, tick, tick, boom. Right? It has no clave. It is not polyrhythmic. It's not sophisticated. It's not complex. But anybody can stand in one place and shake their ass and dance to it. And that was the appeal of the dembo rhythm. And that's the same appeal of the bachata also, because bachata is not based on the clave either. Um, it could be because bachata could be played as a bolero song, in which case you would have the clave, and but they don't approach bachata with the clave. They approach it with downbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, which made it easy for the young people in New York or wherever who want to hold on to each other and they want to dance together and have that physical contact, with each other, man, woman, boy, girl contact. And bachata was the perfect music to do it because they didn't have to worry about the clave and being on beat or off beat with the clave. All they had to do was follow the downbeats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 1 and 2 and 3, and that's it. Okay, so that's a long-winded uh, uh, a theory about why the bachata has become so popular and why the reggaeton music based on the dembo rhythm has become so popular because it doesn't have clave, and clave is too complex and too sophisticated for this new generation.
Right. So the future of salsa is in danger then.
Oh, definitely. A lot of people don't want to accept the reality of the situation. I've heard others, my colleagues, other salsa artists, when they get asked the question, what do you think about the future of salsa? And they come out with, oh, la salsa nunca se va a morir. The salsa will live forever. And like, I mean, that's like pie in the sky. That's like living in fantasy land because that's, you're not, you're wearing blinkers. You're not seeing the reality of what's happening. The most important thing is the loss of the clave. Once the clave gets lost, you're not going to be able to bring back this sophisticated rhythmic structure of a music that is way too sophisticated for the listeners. They can't handle the clave. It's too complicated for them.
Right, right. And you
Yeah.
said there's no clave in salsa romantica, right?
No, salsa romantica has clave. The only thing with salsa romantica is that the focus is on the singer and the song. In in the what they call hard salsa, salsa dura, or the old style típico salsa, the focus was on the song, but not just the song. The focus was on the entire group. You would have trumpet solos, you'd have percussion solos, piano solos, and it was an entire unit, and everybody played an important role. But in the salsa romantica, little by little, the focus uh, uh, started to get on the singer, the good-looking young man who was singing these romantic songs, and he'd have like a salsa rhythm behind him, but the focus is on the song. And you know what where it comes from? It's because in the old days, when salsa was very popular, in the boom days of salsa, uh, women used to dance salsa. They would go to the clubs. They loved it, but they weren't really record buyers. When the female market in those days was more ballads and boleros and romantic things, because that's the female nature. They're attracted to romance and romantic things. And then when the salsa romantica started in the mid 80s, all of a sudden the females started to buy this music, and the record companies started to see a big surge in record sales. So the record companies right away, they started to promote salsa romantica, and they started to uh, focus on the female market, and that's what happened over there. I'm not anti-romantic, and I'm not anti-romance. I'm not anti-love, because in every one of my albums, I try to include a couple of romantic songs. I always try to find a balance. I include a couple of romantic songs, a couple of serious songs with a spiritual message, a couple of songs that have a political tinge, a socio-political message, and I include some songs that are funny, humorous, and a couple of songs that are simply pa gozar y bailar,
Yes.
dance songs, you know.
Yes.
And I try to find that balance. I'm not anti salsa romantica, but when the only thing that you have to sing about is "Mami te quiero y sin ti me muero," well, that's very. I consider that there's the whole world out here, and so many life is so multifaceted that to concentrate on only one aspect of life, even though it is very important, the mating game and love and sex and finding Mr. Right and getting married, that's is super important, but that's not the only thing in life. So I think that with the salsa romantica, we have missed out on a lot. And also, the salsa in general got very watered down because of the focus on the song and the balada and the singer. Because most of the salsa romantica songs are ballads
Mhm.
that were taken,
Yeah.
that were originally written and recorded as ballads, and then they were adapted to salsa. So
Right.
that's what that's all about.
So in the future, how would you like your music to be described as?
How to be described?
Yes.
Um, well, my music has always kept the roots of the son cubano, and I've stayed very close to the root as far as the structure.
Right.
However, uh, at the beginning, like I said before, like with the Rolling Stones, and you want to be authentic, and I wanted to be very authentic at the beginning, but over the years, my style has evolved, and I've brought more of my personality and more of my New York culture into this uh, typical, authentic son cubano format. And I added the tenor sax. I started to use elements of jazz and elements of Brazilian music and elements of pop music in my arrangements. And little by little, my style has evolved. Uh, I wouldn't really call it mainstream salsa because my style has never been really mainstream salsa. My style has always been the típico, what they call típico branch of salsa.
Right.
But what I've tried to do over the years is to create a modern son,
Right.
son moderno or son contemporáneo. In other words, I want to continue the tradition of the song.
Right.
I've never been interested in nostalgia. Like most of my songs have original, most of my albums have original songs that were played in that traditional way, but it's not doing, I did some covers, yes, but I never was interested in nostalgia. I was interested in continuing the tradition of the son and creating a son moderno, a modern son, or a contemporary son, un son contemporáneo. That's the best way to categorize my music, I think.
Right. And a music with a message.
Well, sometimes there's a message, not all the time, but unfortunately, most of my songs that have a message have flown over the head of 99% of the listening public. And it's very depressing because those are the songs that are most important to me. Those are the songs that are close to my heart, that I spent a long time trying to find the exact words to express some very profound ideas. And people are not interested in that. Like, for example, you take a song like El Secreto that talks about life and the meaning of life. And, you know, very few people really know or paid attention to that song. But then you take a song like Zumbale, which is based on a child's patty cake game, and it has nonsense syllables, nonsense words to it. It's just, just silliness. Because at that time, when I was a school teacher, I happened to see two little girls in the back of the classroom playing a patty cake game, and it
Right.
sounded kind of catchy. And I said to them, "Tell me what you're saying," and I slowly, so I could write it down. So I made a song out of these silly lyrics to a patty cake game, and that
Wow.
became one of my most popular songs.
Yes.
Okay, so that just goes to show you where the public is. The public is not, they're not looking for, there's an, oh yes, okay, there is an element in but in the public who has a sophisticated ear, who's looking for spiritual food or intellectual food in the music. But they're the exception. They're in a minority. The vast majority of the listening public, they're just looking for something catchy that they can dance to or sing along with, and that's. But to somebody who's a serious composer, who tries to really put their heart into their compositions. And I have a song. One of my favorite songs is La Canción del Delfín, which is a
Okay.
very artistic, poetic song. And like, there's only a handful of people that that have even heard that song. So
Wow.
that's the way it goes. That's the way the Tootsie rolls.
So what is La Canción del Delfín about?
Well, it's a poetic song it's symbolic. It's a song about a, un delfín. How do you say a dolphin?
Uh-huh.
Because the dolphin is the most intelligent animal on the face of the earth, according to scientists.
Right.
It's a story of a dolphin who is consumed by sadness and depression, and is looking for his graveyard. Is looking to find his final resting place, and he sings his song as he's searching for his final resting place. He wants to die,
Wow.
and he hears but the sea swallows up his song, and then all of a sudden, um, he hears he hears a sound, and he sings along. Instead of singing his own sad song, he sings along with this other sound, and he eventually recovers his happiness. And then the montuno
Uh-huh.
it starts off very sad, and then the montuno kicks in, and it's a very joyous song, because he finds his salvation, and he's jumping and dancing in the waves and singing to the sunset and singing to the rainbow, and it's all poetic. Uh, it's poetic images. It's not, it's made to be understood as a musical poem. It's
Right.
not it's not made to be understood in a literal way. It's made to understand
Surrealistic.
in a poetic, symbolic type of way.
Beautiful. And speaking of some of the lyrics of your songs in your latest works, there is a song as well about the fable of the story of the donkey, which I really like.
Well, what happened with that is that for decades and decades, the format has been the album.
Right.
All the artists they would work on producing an album. But now with the internet, and the way the internet has killed album sales and has killed record sales uh, almost completely, what has happened now is that we've gone back to the 1950s, and it's become a business of singles. Instead of thinking of making an album, the artists have been making singles,
Yes.
individual songs. So I thought I'd take a stab at that, and I decided to make a single as an experiment. And I took this fable that I heard when I was a child. There used to be an Italian version of this fable that I used to hear in my grandparents' house. But from what I understand, this is a very a well-known fable, that there's versions of it that in Latin America they're familiar
Yes.
with it, in Europe and all over the world. And I don't know, you want me to tell the whole story? Because it's a little long, but
Or
uh,
maybe the short version. Just
short version, it's about a father and a son who come into town riding a donkey, and everybody starts criticizing. They're too heavy. They're going to break the animal's back, and so then the father says, "Look, I'll get off, and you stay riding, and that way we'll shut everybody up, and nobody's going to talk." But then when they saw the father walking and the son riding, they said, "Oh, look at that! The son is like he's like a little prince, and the poor old man is." So then the father says, "Well, let's switch. I'll ride the donkey and you walk, and we're going to shut everybody up, and nobody's going to talk." So then when the people saw the father riding the donkey and the son walking, they started saying, "Oh, this is like child abuse. The poor kid is walking and the father is riding." So then the father says, "Look, I'm going to get down from the donkey. I'm going to walk. You're going to walk, and we're going to shut all of these people up once and for all, so they stop criticizing, and we're going to shut them up." So when the people see the father and the son coming into the town walking the donkey, they started, "Look at how stupid, the two ignorant idiots, two idiots, they got a perfectly good donkey and they don't even use them." So and the moral of the story is, in Spanish, that's when the chorus comes in. "No importa lo que tú hagas, la gente va a hablar." No matter what you do, people are going to talk.
absolutely.
That's the message of the song. So in other words, people are just, they're just gossipers by nature. They always want to find the feather in the egg, and they're going to find something to talk about no matter what you do. So you might as well just please yourself, because if you try to please everybody else, you're just going to get frustrated and it's not going to work. So please yourself, enjoy yourself, and later for everybody. Let them talk all they want.
Love it, love it. Thank you so much for that story. And before we move on to your book, which is what we want to discuss today, you have on your website you have 3 of your latest albums available for download. So tell us about that decision.
Well, what happened was is that when I first started with the first free album on my website, what motivated me to take that step was all of the pirating that was going on in Latin America. Like every street corner, they were selling pirate CDs, and then after that, they started selling the MP3s, where they put 100 songs on one disc, and then after that, they started selling the USB sticks, where they put your entire repertoire of everything you've ever recorded in your life on one little stick, and it was impossible to sell records and impossible to do anything. So I got to the point where I said to myself, instead of having my music stolen from me, I would rather just give it away.
Right.
And that's what I did. I recorded 3 albums. The first one, it was called De Cachete. The second one, Salsa Subterránea. And the third one is Ciudadano del Mundo. And I offered them free download off of my website, henryfiol.com. And the idea was to just to stay in the game, so that the contracts would keep coming in, so I would be a viable artist on the salsa scene. Because as soon as you stop recording, you go into into el olvido.
Right, right.
You go into yesterday, and you're completely forgotten. So to keep myself alive and to keep traveling and doing performances, I decided I would rather make an investment and give these 3 albums for free on my website. And unfortunately, I didn't get the response that I was expecting, because the radio, the commercial radio, didn't support me on not even one of those. These 3 albums contain 31 new songs.
Wow.
That I wrote myself. These are my own compositions. 31 songs.
Wow.
Contained in these 3 CDs, and not even one out of the 31 songs was supported on the commercial radio.
Wow.
So I didn't get the response on the downloads that I was expecting. So you take another shot, and that's the way the Tootsie rolls, right?
Right, right. So I guess that through the disappointment, is that why you move into writing?
Well, no, that's not the way that happened. I wrote this story about 20 years ago, and I shopped it around to all of the publishing houses in New York, and I didn't get any takers, and it was very frustrating and very depressing, because I put my heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into this novel, and unfortunately I didn't have any connections at all in the literary world, and that's part of what the problem was. Because if you don't, and there's a saying in Spanish, el que no tiene padrino no se bautiza. Like, if you don't have a godfather, you can't get baptized. So
Right.
in other words, if you don't have a connection in that world, that a very elitist, exclusive
Right.
literary world, you can't get to first base. And the problem with a literary work is that you can't even get anybody to read your work. Because, see, for example, with music, if I send you, Tuli, a demo tape of my new song, well, you might listen to it because it only takes 4 minutes of your time.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to check this out. 4 minutes. I can give 4 minutes to this guy and listen to his demo.
Right.
But how are you going to get somebody to invest days to read a pretty long novel? They want you to pay them to read it.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to pay people to read your novel, and then you have to. You have the gatekeepers who are the literary agents who control anything that goes into the and they're deluged by manuscripts. They get hundreds of manuscripts every day, and they're swimming in a mountain of manuscripts, and they're not about to look at anything. So anyway, it looked like a hopeless case, a hopeless cause. So I got very depressed and very I got worn out trying to get a publisher for my novel. So I decided before I get sick worrying about this and get into a deep depression, I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it in the drawer, and I'm going to forget about it.
Right.
So that's what I did for 20 years. And then what happened was that I was doing a TV program for an Italian American cultural TV program, and someone asked me about my novel, and I started thinking about it, and then I said to myself, you know, things have changed. You know, nowadays with the internet, maybe you don't need a publishing house to publish your work. Maybe you can publish it yourself, because with the internet and Amazon, it's a completely new ball game.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, you know something? I'm going to take this novel, I'm going to pull it out of the drawer, and I'm going to rewrite it. So that's what I did. I wrote it all over again. I trimmed off all the fat. It was a little too long, and the language was a little too difficult to read, because the original version was written phonetically in the Italian American slang of the streets of New York. And I tried to be very authentic, and I would write it phonetically, and it was too hard to read. So what I did in the second version, I trimmed all the fat, and then I put everything into standard English. When people are speaking, I use a little bit of the street slang, and I use a little bit of phonetic spelling of the street language. But I don't think it's nobody has told me it's hard to read anymore. It's very easy to read now, and I tried to publish it myself, and it was a very difficult task to publish this novel. And it's funny that my old friend and my colleague from way back in the Saoko days, William Millan, who had some experience self-publishing some books that he had written, and he was very helpful, and he helped me, and he walked me through it, and blood, sweat, and tears, and it took a long time, but we finally were able to put it up on Amazon. So that's the story. So now the title of the book is The Short End of the Stick.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see it here.
Beautiful. And I take it you painted the cover as well.
Yeah, I painted the cover. You know, it might be a little misleading because you see a boy and a jockey, and it's a story of a handicapped boy who has one leg shorter than the other. He has a medical condition called LLD, leg length discrepancy, and he limps, and he's rejected in his neighborhood. He's an outcast, and he's ridiculed, and he wants to belong, and he wants to fit in, and he's bullied by the neighborhood bullies, and he's treated in a very shabby way in his neighborhood. And his neighborhood is one of the worst neighborhoods in New York at that time. It used to be called Italian Harlem, and it was like very rough streets. And he gets involved in gangs, because he wants to belong. He gets involved with the gang. He gets involved in a lot of things. But what happens to him is that he goes to the racetrack with his uncle, and he falls in love with the racetrack. And because not only is he crippled, but he's very short and he's very skinny and he's almost like midget size. So what happens is that he falls in love with the racetrack, and when he starts to see that he's not going to grow and become as tall as a regular person, and when he gets to be 15 and 16, he starts setting his sights on becoming a jockey, because he knows that when he's up on the back of a racehorse, his problem of limping and his problem of his legs is going to be meaningless. And it's going to be a level playing field for the first time in his life. And he's going to be just as good as anybody else. And that's his dream. And the story takes you through his childhood, his adolescence, his teenage years, his young adulthood, and it takes you through his life, and it shows you how he realizes his dream. Unfortunately, after he does become a jockey, he has a very successful year as an apprentice, and then he hits a wall, and he hits a very severe slump, and he gets involved with drugs. He gets involved with the mafia, and I don't want to tell the whole story, but a lot of people don't understand where I was coming from with this story. And the best way to understand it is in the following way. I'm the father of a handicapped child. My first son is blind from birth.
Right.
So that's why I understand what it means to be handicapped,
right,
and what it means to be rejected and to want to belong and to feel just as good as everybody else. I went through that with my son.
Right.
So this character in this story, even though I'm not talking about blindness, I'm talking about the life of a handicapped child. And I know what it means because I went through it as the father of a handicapped child. Okay. So that's where I'm coming from writing this story. Then the other thing is, people don't understand, why do I have to trace? It's a chronicle of his life, his childhood, his adolescence, his teenage years, his young adulthood. Why do you have to go through all of that? Well, you know why I have to go through all of that? Because let's take the story of Jesus, for example. Everybody calls the story of Jesus the greatest story ever told, right? You've heard that. Well, I don't think it's the greatest story ever told. I think it's flawed. It has a very big flaw in that story. And the reason why that the story of Jesus is flawed is because we don't know anything at all about this figure, Jesus of Nazareth, until he comes on the scene at age 30. Okay, there's one little story about how he got lost when he was 12 years old on a trip to Jerusalem, and they didn't find him. And when they finally found him, he was in the temple talking with the elders. But outside of that one little story, we don't know anything about this holy man who changed the history of the world. Okay? Now, if that is not a flawed story, then I don't know what is, because I want to know, what was Jesus like when he was a little boy? What was he like when he was a teenager? What was he like when he was a young man? How did he become the Jesus that went out and saved the world and preached all of these beautiful messages to the world? How did he become this man? Well, that's why it's a flawed story, because we don't know his childhood, his adolescence, and his young adulthood. And what I did in my story is that I take you, it's a chronicle. I take you through, the name of the character is Joey Posella. I take you through his childhood. I take you through his adolescence, when he hits puberty. you know what it is for a handicapped boy to go to a dance and gets rejected because nobody wants to dance with you because you're too short and you got one leg shorter than the other? Okay, that just gives you an idea. Then when you get a little older, then you start to run with the gangs and you start to get and you wind up in jail. Well, these are all part of the story of my character, okay? Because I want when the drama starts, when he goes to the racetrack and he realizes his dream and the drama accelerates, because it does accelerate in the last chapters and it gets very dramatic. But it's not a flawed story anymore because you understand where this person is coming from because you went through his childhood, you went through his adolescence, you went through his young adult, you went through all of that with him.
Right,
So
right.
you know who he is.
Yeah.
Just like how much more could have we understood about Jesus if we would have understood all of his all of his life before age 30? We would have really understood Jesus. But we can just guess, you know. Oh, yeah, he came and he started preaching, yeah, but we don't really know who Jesus was. Okay? If we would have known his childhood and all of his young years and all of because we as human beings, we are the sum total of our experiences. Okay? That's who we are. Any person, you, me, anybody else, in order to understand us, you have to understand what we went through in our individual lives because
Right.
we are the sum total of our experiences. We didn't just pop out at age 30 or age 40 and oh, here we are. No, each one of us has a history and a story and a family and a neighborhood and an ethnicity and all these things make us who we are as people. And in order to really understand somebody, you got to take it all the way back from day one and follow them through their lives to really understand who they are.
Right. So from the front of the disability, you're talking from having experienced it yourself and from your son, but also in terms of the equestrian side of things, would it be because of your father?
Oh, well, of course. Well, because I grew up going to the racetrack all the time with my father. And, but I was looking for something, for example, with my son, all right? My son is blind from birth, but my son has found music on the playing field of music. He is
Amazing.
not only equal to anybody else, he's beyond everybody else because
Excellent.
God takes away one thing and gives you something else. His
Yes.
ear is so finely tuned
Wow.
that he has absolute pitch, perfect pitch. He's beyond perfect pitch. He has absolute pitch. You know, he if you can ask him, give me an A flat, and he can go, and you can play the piano, and he gave you that note. That's how advanced, how finely tuned his ear is, because God took away his eyes, but he's got his ears. So this boy in my story, he was unfortunately God took away his legs, and he had to limp and get ridiculed and ostracized. But he found something. The same way my son found music, he found something where his handicap doesn't mean anything. And
Right.
he's on the back of a horse,
Yes.
and the legs are coming from the horse. He doesn't need his legs anymore. He's guiding the horse with the horse's legs. So he found his way of being equal and being
Yes.
just as good as everybody else. And that's why I selected the idea of being a jockey and the idea of the racetrack, because I was looking for something where he could find uh, his his identity as a
Yes.
human being, where he could feel that he was equal to everybody else. He was just as good as everybody else. And the racetrack and the jockey was the thing
Medium.
that's
Beautiful story, Henry. I appreciate it. So the short end of the stick, where can we find it?
Well, it's available on Amazon, Amazon.com. I think it's available in the UK
Right.
on Amazon. And, you order the book and you can order it either as a paperback like a paperback copy, and it'll
Yes.
come to you in the mail, or you can order it as an ebook and you can read it on your Kindle or whatever, But Tuli, what I'm starting to realize is that people don't have the patience to read books anymore. The book has almost become obsolete, unfortunately, because the internet and the cell phones and the smartphones has taken our attention span and has shrunk it to the point where the average person has the attention span of a kindergarten child.
Right.
Okay, we're not interested in finding something out, going to a library, reading a book, investing some time to find something out, because what you get out of life is what you put into it. If you're too lazy and your attention span is too short to read a book, then you're not going to get anything out of it. What you're going to get out of life is sound bites.
Right.
Okay, you're going to get sound bites. You're going to get quick little answers from Google. You're not going to know shit from Shinola, like they say in English. You're not going to learn. You're not going to know your ass from your elbow. All you're going to get is little Google bites. If you want to find something out, what do? You Google it, and you get a quick little answer, right? But it's not like you go to a library and you read books and you find out as much as you can about something. You invest your time to really find something out. Well, that's what you need to appreciate my story.
Right.
If you're the type of person who is going to invest the time to read a book, then don't even bother. Do me a favor. Don't even order it. Don't order it. Leave it alone. This is not for you. Okay? This is not for everybody. This is only for the type of people who are going to start something and they're going to finish it. Because there's a lot of people who they might start it and they might, this is a good read. And they'll go through a couple of chapters and then they'll run out of gas because they don't have the discipline to follow through and to go all the way with something. If you're not going to go all the way, then don't bother. So this book is not for everybody. So if you're the type of person that has discipline and you have the desire to go all the way, then order my book, and I hope that you like it. And thank you very much. And I hope in my heart that you really like the book. But if you're not the type of person that's going to go all the way, then don't bother, because this is not for you.
Only for the keen readers. Only for the keen readers.
That's the way it is, because it's not like music. Music, you don't have to invest your time. You just music is passive. It's not active. To read, you have to be active. You have to read the words. The words have to register in your mind. Your mind has to make the connection. Your emotions get connected with the words, with the message in your mind. It's more complicated. But to listen to music, all you got to do is open up your ears and open up a can of beer and lay back, and it's a passive act. It's not a active. You're not investing your time. You're just laying back, and it's the artists, the musicians are doing all the work. But when you're reading a book, you have to do the work. So that's why in this day and age of instant gratification, and no attention span, my book is like an anachronism. It's like out of touch with the reality of 2021. Okay, but if you're one of those people that, if you're willing to make the sacrifice and go all the way, then check it out.
Excellent. And Henry, is there an option where we can actually order the paperback and get a signed copy of it? Is that at all possible?
Well, how much does it cost to get on the metro in London?
it depends where you're going. It's a bit expensive. Public transport in the UK is a bit expensive. So, like,
Oh, just give me a figure, like uh, how
well,
many
for
pounds
me, if I give you an example, I don't live in London, but for me to get to London, which is just 1 hour, is £30 a day. We're
Oh,
talking
30
about
pounds.
$40.
Okay. Well, with my signature on the book and 30 pounds, you can get on the metro. Okay. You know, like in New York, with a Metro card and my signature, you can get on the subway. In other words, my signature is not going to do nothing for you. Don't worry about my signature. I would rather you be more interested in seeing what this person has to say. Don't worry about my signature. People that are looking for signatures, most of the people are looking for resale value. So after this guy is gone, after Henry Fiol is dead, I got an album with his signature,
I see
and
where
I
you're
can
coming
sell
from.
that sucker for a lot of money. I don't know what your motive is, but
Right.
forget about the signature. The motive in checking out my book should be, hey, this guy is a sensitive, autistic person. I've checked him out writing all of his songs, the way he sings, the way he writes his music. This is an autistic person. I wonder what he has to say in a book.
Right.
I'm curious to see what this man has to say in writing, not in music, but in writing. I
Yeah.
really want to see what he has to say. The hell with the signature. The signature don't mean nothing. If the
Okay,
signature
okay,
is
fair enough then. No
worthless.
signature. But you are an artist in the true sense of the word. You're a painter, you're a musician, and now you're a writer. So amazing. And we look forward to checking out your latest book and your future projects. I hear that you have a concert coming up. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, ever since COVID hit the scene, I haven't done anything in music. Uh, I accepted a job in Miami for December 11th, I think it is. That's going to be the first time that I step up on a stage since the beginning of COVID,
Right.
and we'll see what happens. I'm worried that I might forget how to sing. Maybe I'm going to forget the words. Maybe my voice is shot and I won't be able to sing anymore. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to test the waters. I'm
Yes.
going to test the waters on in December 11th in Miami, and then we'll take it from there and see what happens. But I'm not. I don't have the enthusiasm anymore for music.
Right.
I'm not planning on going back to performing full scale like I was doing before COVID. I'm getting older, and I think I don't want to retire completely, but I think I want to semi-retire, and I want to be very selective about the performances that I accept. In other
Right.
words, if there's something that interests me and I feel that I might like to do it, yeah, okay, let's do it. But if it's something that doesn't appeal to me, I think I'll pass. So that's the
Right.
way that's what I'm planning on doing in the future. I don't have any plans to record anymore. I'm not going to be making any more records because I'm not a masochist. You have to be a masochist to record nowadays because you're not going to sell any records. It's just a waste of time, and it's a big investment of money and time and effort. And I'm not going to be recording anymore. I don't see any plans to record again.
Right.
And as far as live performances, if it's something I feel like doing, yeah, I might do it. But I'm going to scale everything back. That's
Right.
that's my attitude now.
Well, fingers
And
crossed you'll
I'll
accept
tell
an
you the truth.
invite to the UK in the future, hopefully. We'll
Well,
see.
it's funny how there's a saying in Spanish, no hay mal que por bien no venga,
Right.
right? That nothing, I don't know how you translate that, but
There's no bad.
nothing bad comes for that's
For a
not
good
connected with for a good reason or for
Yes.
something good. Well, anyway, at the beginning when I wrote my novel, I couldn't get it published. But now 20 years later, at the end of my musical career, I'm finally able to put my novel out there. And I think that maybe no hay mal que por bien no venga. I think it was good that I didn't publish it 20 years ago, because
yeah.
now this is going to be the most important thing that I have created in my artistic life. This book is much more important than any song I've ever written. It's much more
Wow.
important than any painting I've ever painted. This is like the most important thing. This is my you could call it crowning achievement or whatever you want to call it. This is the most important thing in my life as an artist, and for it to come to be made public at the end of my career is almost like it's almost like a blessing. It's almost like it was meant to be. So I feel very good that this book is coming out now at the end of my career, and that's going to be it for me. You know, I'll play it by ear and we'll see what happens.
Excellent, excellent. So, Henry, what would be your final message to those listening to us today?
Well, first of all, as usual, I have to thank you for all your support over the years. I've made a beautiful career as an artist, a musician, a singer. Thanks to each and every one of you out there. You've supported me through the years, and I owe everything to you. So thank you thanks a million for all your support. I wish you all the best. I wish you good health to each one of you, you and your family. And I always sign off with the same thing. Fe, esperanza y caridad. Siempre pa'lante y nunca para atrás.
Amen. Oh, fantastic, Henry. Well, wish you all the very best and all the success with your latest project with this book. And I really do hope that we get to see you on stage again very, very soon. And all the best with that concert in Miami in December. All the very best, Henry. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Tuli, for your interest in este servidor, the way we say it in Spanish. Thank you for your interest in my music and for the opportunity to be with you. God bless you. I really appreciate it very, very much. And I wish you all the best.
Thank
God
you
bless
so
you.
much, Henry. Thank you.